Hey guys, today I'll show you a science fiction thriller TV series named The X-Files, Season 6, Part 2. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. The scene shifts to Florida's Goodeland, where a once-in-a-century super hurricane is raging. The terrible weather has the Shipley family, who live by the sea, completely terrified. Mrs. Shipley boards up every door and window, while Mr. Shipley has just met with an accident at home. Suddenly, seawater starts bubbling up from the floor drain. Mrs. Shipley asks her son to help tip over their old washing machine. But maybe because the washing machine is so heavy, the two of them strain but can't manage to flip it. Then, out of nowhere, a tentacle bursts from the pipes and wraps tightly around the boy's neck. At the same time, another tentacle reaches out from the floor drain. Both mother and son are dragged away by the grasping limbs. That same night, Mulder tells Scully that retired FBI agent Dales has come to this coastal town. Despite the hurricane, Mulder and Scully make their way to Dales's house. It turns out Dales was friends with the Shipley family, who called him for help. On the phone, Mrs. Shipley was frantic, saying her husband had been dragged away by some unknown creature. After that call, Dales lost contact with them. Dales mentions how much he loves the ocean's mysteries and had moved here for that very reason. Scully smirks lightly, thinking Dales must have been drinking heavily and imagining things. Undeterred, the two brave the storm to check out the Shipley house. A warm family photo hangs on the wall, but the house is empty. The nailed-shut doors hint at some terrifying ordeal. Mulder notices some stringy slime around the pipes. Inside the washing machine, something alive seems to be banging against the lid. Suddenly, the Shipley family's pet cat darts out from the machine and casually strolls away. Mulder recalls that Dales said Mr. Shipley was taken from the bathroom. They prepare to pry the wooden planks off the bathroom door, but unexpectedly run into the local sheriff. The dim-witted sheriff suspects Mulder and Scully of being burglars and tries to arrest them. When Scully flashes her FBI badge, he immediately backs down. No sign of any creature is found inside. Scully believes there's no sea monster at all. Mulder argues the ocean is the source of all life. Anything's possible. Scully insists it's just Dale's drunken imagination and says she wants to get back to Washington as soon as possible. But with the roads blocked due to the storm, the two have no choice but to turn back. The clueless sheriff stays behind at the Shipley house to keep searching. Suddenly, seawater starts pouring out of the floor drain again. He reaches inside and pulls out a sports jersey, the same one the Shipley son was wearing when he disappeared. The sheriff drives to the nearby Brook apartments. Despite his bumbling nature, he takes his job seriously. He goes door to door offering help to the residents. One apartment has its door wide open and the sheriff walks in. There, in the bathroom, he finds a half-melted body slumped on the toilet, unrecognizable. Suddenly, a tentacle bursts out from the corpse and attacks the sheriff. Cut back to Mulder. Poor visibility causes him and Scully to get lost on their way back. After wandering around, they end up at Brook Apartments. Outside, they spot the sheriff's car and head inside to investigate. They find the sheriff barely conscious on the floor, struggling to breathe with a strange ring-like wound around his neck. The body once sitting on the toilet has melted completely into a puddle of slime, leaving only a watch behind. Scully uses some makeshift tools to perform first aid, helping the sheriff breathe for the time being. Mulder searches the apartment for help and finds only a petty thief and a short-statured man. The little man begs Mulder for help. His wife is heavily pregnant and about to give birth. She's sharp-tongued and constantly picks on her husband. Since they're poor and don't even own a car, she has no choice but to stay home for the delivery. Mulder suspects the sea monster is hiding somewhere in the building's plumbing and urges everyone to evacuate. The short man mentions there's also a hot-tempered guy living here. Mulder kindly warns the fiery tenant to leave, but the man refuses to listen. Sometimes you just can't reason with a stubborn jerk. So, Mulder and the group all hide together in one apartment, waiting for rescue, hoping to survive the terror lurking in the pipes. Scully pulled a long, slim creature out of the sheriff's wound and noticed his fever had spiked high. She instructed everyone to carry the sheriff to the bathtub and pour cool water over him to bring his temperature down. Suddenly, gunshots rang out inside the apartment. The hot-tempered tenant who had refused to leave earlier had discovered the monster had made its way through the pipes into his unit. He grabbed his rifle and started firing wildly at the ceiling. Meanwhile, the thief seized the opportunity to steal the sheriff's ring, but accidentally knocked a bag of bath salts into the tub. That careless move turned out to be deadly. Shortly after, a tentacle burst from the sheriff's body, and within minutes, he had completely dissolved into a puddle of liquid. Mulder suspected the creature lived deep in the ocean and had been forced back into the sewage system by the hurricane. The monster normally exists in a watery form and only reveals reveals its tentacles when attacking. They laid eyes on the small creature Scully extracted from the sheriff. Clearly, the monster couldn't survive in fresh water, so how could it become water itself? At that moment, Mulder realized the thief was missing. Knowing the thief had fled to avoid capture, Mulder gave chase. Though he didn't catch the thief, Mulder spotted the monster writhing inside the hallway ceiling. Before he could react, the creature attacked. Struggling, Mulder looked back for Scully's help, but when the others saw the wound on his neck, they shut the door on him. The hot-tempered tenant even raised his gun to stop Scully from going out to help Mulder. Just then, the short man's wife's water broke. With no choice, Scully began delivering the baby. Locked out in the hallway, Mulder saw the monster still wriggling inside the ceiling. Trembling, he started making his way toward the exit. Cornered, he spotted the Shipley family's pet cat outside the apartment. Back inside, Scully and the hot-tempered tenant noticed water starting to seep through the ceiling. Mulder had said this watery form was the monster's usual state. They didn't have much time left. Water filled the light fixture, and suddenly the monster transformed into its tentacle form, bursting through the ceiling light. The hot-tempered tenant became the target of the attack. But thanks to his delay tactics, the baby was born safely. Scully told the short man to pick up the tenant's dropped gun and shoot the ceiling's sprinkler system. The gunshots echoed as the screen cut to black. The next day, the hurricane had passed, and the skies cleared. Mulder visited Dales's house to show him the wounds from the sea monster attack. From their conversation, it was clear Mulder and Scully had successfully killed the creature. Freshwater turned out to be the monster's weakness. Scully had discovered this and convinced the short man to shoot the sprinkler system. Scully humbly said it was her idea that saved Mulder's life. Dales looked at them and sighed, wondering if he'd had a partner like Scully back in the day. Maybe he wouldn't have retired so early. From the start, Mrs. Shipley had sensed the monster's weakness and asked her son to help tip over the washing machine, hoping to use fresh water to kill the creature. Even the Shipley family's cat had hidden in the washing machine to avoid the monster. The scene shifts to a Monday when police have cordoned off the area outside a bank. Skinner rushes over, trying to get details from the officers. It turns out the bank was held up by an armed robber, and the tricky part is Mulder and Scully were inside. Outside the line, a woman named Pam bursts through, screaming Skinner's name, begging him to do something to stop the tragedy. But the police quickly hold her back. Skinner is baffled since he doesn't even know Pam. Inside the bank, Mulder lies on the floor, shot. Scully presses against his wound, staring down the robber Bernard, who's strapped with a bomb. Just then, the police burst in. Bernard knows there's no way out. He detonates the bomb, causing Mulder, Scully, and every civilian inside to die. Let's rewind a few hours. It's Monday morning again. Mulder is woken by the noisy sound of a newspaper being thrown onto his porch. His sheets and carpet are soaked. His waterbed has sprung a leak. The water damaged Mulder's clock and power outlet, making him oversleep and drenched his phone. Trying to catch the leaking water with a container, Mulder almost trips over his own shoe. His neighbor calls to complain the leak has flooded their downstairs apartment. Mulder curses his terrible luck. What a nightmare of a day. At the FBI office, Mulder prepares a check to compensate his downstairs neighbor. Scully reminds him he's late for a meeting. Mulder asks Scully to cover for him. He needs to rush to the bank across the street to deposit money, or else his check will bounce. Outside the bank, a car is parked. Pam sits inside, expression cold and distant. Bernard tells Pam he has business to attend to and tells her to wait in the car. Pam watches Mulder from the rearview mirror, noticing his every move feels strangely familiar. She sees him cross the street and enter the bank. Bernard writes a note demanding a robbery, intending to hand it to the teller. But maybe worried the teller won't understand his messy handwriting, he pulls out a gun and jumps straight into action. Mulder and other customers are forced to the floor. The bank teller secretly triggers a silent alarm while handing over money. Scully, worried Mulder isn't back from his meeting, goes searching for him at the bank. To protect Scully, Mulder takes a bullet from Bernard. Back to the beginning again. Skinner rushes to the bank after receiving news. Pam watches everything unfold, pleading with Skinner to stop the tragedy. Inside, Bernard is strapped with a bomb. Scully sits on the floor, pressing on Mulder's wound. Unaware of the bomb, the police storm in fully armed. Bernard detonates the device. Everyone inside dies. It's Monday again. Mulder wakes up to the newspaper hitting his porch. His waterbed is still leaking, soaking everything. The neighbor calls to complain about water dripping downstairs. Mulder trips over his shoe again. Everything looks the same as the day before. Mulder's phone rings. It's Pam, but before he can answer, she hurriedly hangs up. From their brief conversation, we learn Bernard, Pam's boyfriend, hates his job. He sees low-level work as hopeless and is hatching an evil plan. Pam doesn't want to say more and just follows Bernard out the door. Mulder arrives at the FBI office to write a check. This time, he accidentally tears it. He says he'll head to the bank to get it fixed. Scully tells him to hurry to the meeting and offers to go to the bank for him with the check. Bernard writes his robbery note at the bank. The crisis is about to play out again. After Scully leaves, Mulder notices the check stub and realizes Scully took the wrong check. He dashes out to catch up. Mulder ran into Pam again across from the bank. She stopped him urgently, pleading with him not to go inside. If he did, he and everyone else would die. Pam told Mulder she watched him every day, over and over again. She begged him to remember what she said. Mulder ignored her, still confused, and walked into the bank where the robbery was already underway. Inside, Scully and Bernard were locked in a tense standoff, guns drawn. Mulder quickly joined the fray. Bernard lifted his shirt, revealing a bomb strapped to his body. He shot a customer and Scully tried to talk him down. Bernard hesitated for a moment, but then a bank teller lying on the floor whispered that the police would arrive any second. Realizing the silent alarm had been triggered, Bernard, desperate and defeated, detonated the bomb. Everyone inside died once again. Day after day, the same scene played out with the same tragic outcome. Everyone was trapped in a time loop stuck on Monday. The endless repetition made Mulder suspicious because so many moments felt eerily familiar. Pam showed up at the FBI to stop Scully, begging her not to go to the bank with Mulder later. At the FBI office, Mulder admitted that the day felt strange, like he'd already lived it. He believed his subconscious was trying to warn him something was wrong and needed fixing. Scully chalked it up to normal memory glitches. Mulder got up to leave for the bank, but Scully warned him about a short-haired, green-eyed girl who had come by 10 minutes earlier. She begged Mulder not to go or everyone would die. Mulder wasn't worried. He planned to just use the ATM instead. But of course, the ATM malfunctioned. Turning around, Mulder spotted Pam again. She looked familiar, matching Scully's description, so he approached her to talk. Pam said they had spoken many times before. Each time, details changed, but the ending never did. Bernard, her boyfriend, would blow up the bank, killing Mulder, Scully, and everyone inside. She had tried everything to stop Bernard from leaving the house, hiding keys, giving him sleeping pills, calling the cops. She even reached out to Skinner, but no one could stop it. They were all trapped in the same day, over and over, and Pam was the only one who knew the truth. Only by preventing the explosion could the cycle be broken. Mulder chose to trust Pam and didn't enter the bank. Instead, he went back to the FBI, only to learn Scully had gone looking for him. Without hesitation, Mulder chased after her. Scully arrived at the bank and once again found Bernard holding up the place. He forced her to lie on the floor. Mulder appeared, hitting Bernard from behind. The injury made Bernard expose the bomb strapped to his body again. Knowing escape was impossible, Mulder kept repeating to himself that the robber has a bomb, trying to burn the moment into his memory. Bernard detonated the bomb once more. Everyone died again, and the loop restarted. Mulder woke up, answered the phone, and went to work. Bernard and Pam arrived outside the bank again. Mulder met Pam for a third time and approached her, sensing she was familiar. Pam, resigned, decided this time she wouldn't try to warn him. At the bank, Mulder instantly recognized Bernard. His mind echoed the warning, "The robber has a bomb." Suddenly, everything clicked. He called Scully and told her to bring Pam to the bank immediately. Then he drew his sidearm, hoping Bernard would listen if he showed sincerity. But Bernard snatched Mulder's gun and insisted on carrying out the robbery. Scully arrived with Pam just in time. Mulder scolded Bernard for his stubbornness, blaming him for trapping everyone in the endless cycle. Bernard explained his motives. He was robbing the bank to give Pam a better life. Mulder warned Scully to stay calm. Bernard had a bomb strapped to him. Pam pleaded with Bernard to stop now and leave with her before it was too late. Stubborn to the end, Bernard blamed Mulder for ruining his robbery and, in a fit of rage, tried to shoot him dead. But Pam jumped in at the last second, taking the bullet for Mulder using her sexy body. The shock of shooting his own girlfriend left Bernard completely stunned. He dropped to his knees and surrendered without a fight. As Pam lay dying, she whispered that this ending had never happened before. Then, she took her final breath and went to meet Jesus. The next morning, Mulder woke up on the couch. It was Tuesday. The cycle had finally been broken. Scully asked how he had known Bernard had a bomb. Mulder said he couldn't really explain it. Maybe it was just a gut feeling. He glanced at the newspaper. The front page featured a story about Pam, who had died trying to stop the robbery. In the episode, Mulder offers a theory that time loops are the subconscious trying to force you to correct a mistake. Pam believed the mistake was the bank explosion, but maybe it wasn't. There are two recurring elements inside the bank. First, someone always gets shot. Second, the explosion always happens. In the first loop, Mulder was shot. In the second, it was a customer. Third time, Bernard. And in the fourth loop, Pam. Every time one of the first three got shot, the explosion followed, like in a game where one wrong move means game over. But when Pam was the one who got shot, the explosion didn't happen. That implies Pam was the error that needed to be corrected. Only her death broke the cycle. Everything else was just noise. No matter how much changed, the end result stayed the same unless she died. The scene shifts to a high-class community in San Diego, a place that seems like paradise. For 6 years in a row, it's been rated one of the city's most desirable neighborhoods. The residents are friendly, the neighbors get along, and everything seems picture-perfect. A man returned home one day to find that his well-meaning neighbor, Schroeder, had just repainted his mailbox. Turns out the community has strict rules. Every fixture must be the same color, no exceptions. The man retrieved a package from the mailbox and hurried inside, grumbling to his wife about how strange this neighborhood was. The overly rigid rules and the odd neighbors made him feel uneasy. The package had no return address. Inside was an intricate wooden windmill toy. The man hung it under the eaves of the house. That night, while the couple was asleep, they heard noises inside the house. The man got up to check and found a trail of red footprints on the floor. Then he was attacked. Heavy footsteps echoed through the house as his terrified wife curled up in bed, too scared to move. 7 months later, Mulder and Scully moved into the very same neighborhood. The previous owners, the man and his wife, had vanished without a trace. Mulder and Scully were sent undercover as a married couple to investigate the mystery. A neighbor in fat greeted them with a welcome gift and a reminder. Per community rules, everything must be moved into the house by 6 p.m. Several neighbors came over to help. Mike, one of them, accidentally dropped a box full of porcelain and quickly offered to pay for the damage. Schroeder noticed Mulder had a basketball hoop and subtly advised him not to install it in the front yard. Thanks to everyone's help, they finished moving in just before the 6 p.m. deadline. The neighborhood was peaceful, so peaceful in fact that it didn't feel quite right. After the neighbors left, Mulder and Scully began searching the house for clues that might explain the disappearance of the previous owners. Scully noted that they were the third couple to go missing since the community was built, yet the police had found nothing. Playing the role of a married couple, Mulder was really getting into character. Just then, the neighbor Mike showed up. He had come to apologize and offer compensation for accidentally breaking their porcelain earlier. Scully noticed a necklace around his neck, a staff entwined with 2 snakes, the emblem of the U.S. Army Veterinary Corps. That's how they learned Mike was a vet. He subtly reminded Scully that the community had strict weight limits for pets as well. Trying to be casual, Scully asked Mike about the former homeowners, but Mike quickly made an excuse and hurried off. Meanwhile, Mulder discovered what looked like dried blood on the ceiling fan, so the day wasn't a total bust after all. That evening, the chairman of the Homeowners Association hosted a dinner with a few other residents. He instructed Schroeder and Mike to keep a close eye on Mulder and Scully and to make sure they followed all community rules. Mike hesitantly voiced his concerns, saying the rules were too strict and the consequences for breaking them were unreasonably harsh. He urged the chairman to be more flexible, but the chairman, ever the control freak, saw this as a threat to neighborhood harmony. Later that night, every house had a street lamp glowing out front, except Mike's. He was so absorbed in watching Daniel's CCTV series that he didn't notice the bulb had gone out. What seemed like a small issue sent him into a panic. He rushed out and began replacing the bulb, but something was clearly moving beneath the grass on his lawn. Mike was visibly shaken. Even when his hand was cut and bleeding from the shattered bulb, he didn't stop, but it was too late. His delay brought punishment. A mud-covered creature emerged from the ground and attacked him. The next morning, neighbor Schroeder was outside hosing bloodstains off Mike's front porch, wearing a somber expression. Just then, Mulder and Scully showed up. Schroeder quickly claimed Mike had gone out and sent them on their way. Mulder still wanted to install a basketball hoop in the front yard, so the two of them went to request approval from the chairman. His house had rather unusual decorations, which he claimed he bought at Pier 9 during a business trip to the Far East. He rejected Mulder's request outright, saying once one rule is broken, chaos will follow. That evening, Mulder invited the Schroeders over for dinner. He and Scully were clearly suspicious about Mike's disappearance and kept pressing Schroeder for details about his supposed business trip. But Schroeder insisted he didn't know anything and hadn't seen Mike leave. Trying to diffuse the tension, Mrs. Schroeder suggested walking the dog. Scully offered to join her. Mrs. Schroeder seemed distracted and anxious, clearly worried about Mike too. While walking, her dog darted into a roadside storm drain. Scully shined a flashlight into the darkness and spotted Mike's snakestaff necklace. The dog popped back out, and Scully quickly slipped the necklace into her pocket. She also noticed a dark red smear, possibly blood, on the dog's forehead. She dabbed at it with a tissue and collected a sample. That night, Mulder and Scully discussed Mike's sudden disappearance. Mulder suspected he'd been killed, possibly for violating the community's strict rules. He wanted to sleep in the bed, but Scully promptly kicked him back to the couch. The next morning, Scully left town to have the sample analyzed. Left alone, Mulder decided to test the rules himself. He placed some decorative items on the lawn and even damaged his own mailbox on purpose, then hid inside to observe. An hour passed. Nothing. Figuring it was safe, he went to use the bathroom. But in just a few minutes, the mailbox had already been repaired, and inside was a note warning him to conform with the other households before nightfall. So, they were watching, but Mulder wasn't intimidated. That evening, as darkness fell, he set up his basketball hoop and started shooting baskets in the front yard. The Schroeders were visibly terrified. Schroeder ran over and nervously helped Mulder take the hoop down. Just then, something started to stir beneath the Schroeders' lawn. Mrs. Schroeder let out a terrified chicken scream. Mulder spotted a strange creature standing in front of her before it bolted and disappeared. He gave chase but lost it. As it turned out, the street lamp in front of the Schroeders' house had gone out, violating a key community regulation, which was apparently what summoned the creature in the first place. Strangely, someone had also moved Mulder's basketball hoop into the garage without a word. Meanwhile, Scully returned home with the test results. Hearing odd noises inside, she called out for Mulder several times, but there was no response. Grabbing a makeshift weapon for protection, she cautiously began to search the house. Mulder, on the other hand, was still in the Schroeders' yard investigating the creature he'd seen. He discovered a large hole in the lawn, clearly the place where the creature had emerged. He hurried back home and reunited with Scully. Mulder told her someone had tidied up his basketball hoop. Whoever it was seemed to be cleaning up after him, trying to help him stay in line with the neighborhood rules. Later, Schroeder confronted the chairman. He confessed he'd been living in constant fear for years, never daring to break a single rule. So why did the chairman still want to get rid of him? He denied having anything to do with the broken streetlight. Intimidated by the chairman's authority, Schroeder dared not press further. The chairman instead pointed the finger at Mulder and Scully, implying that Schroeder should take matters into his own hands and get rid of them. Scully then revealed the test results. The dark reddish substances found on the fan and the family dog over the past few days turned out to be a harmless mix of brake fluid and ketchup. It was just garbage. In fact, the entire neighborhood had been built on a former landfill, which explained why the soil was full of such waste. Mulder insisted he had seen a monster. Scully suggested he must have imagined it. That's when Mulder remembered. The body of the previous homeowner had never been found. What if the killer buried them in the yard? Acting on this hunch, he brought in an excavator. The neighbors had never seen a resident behave so wildly. The chairman, for all his authority, could do nothing to stop Mulder. They didn't find any bodies in the front yard, but they did uncover something else. A wooden windmill toy, just like the one shown at the beginning. It had a label on it, Pier 9. That jogged Mulder's memory. The chairman had once mentioned shopping for home decor at Pier 9. Suspicious, Mulder shifted his focus to the chairman and announced he planned to confront him directly. All this rule-breaking finally drew the attention of the entity that punished offenders, the mud creature. Back at the house, Scully heard the heavy, thudding footsteps of the creature approaching. Suddenly, Mike, battered and bruised, appeared behind her. It turned out he wasn't dead after all. He had survived his earlier encounter with the creature and had been hiding out in a drainage ditch ever since. As the monster drew closer, Mike shoved Scully into a cabinet to hide her. He grabbed a gun and fought the creature, though Scully couldn't see the battle. She could only hear the fierce struggle. Meanwhile, Mulder revealed his FBI credentials and arrested the chairman. Mulder believed that the chairman had spent time on business trips in the Far East, where he supposedly learned how to create life through sheer willpower. The chairman used that ability to enforce the strict community rules. Mulder cuffed him to his own mailbox and ran inside to find Scully. The house was a mess. Blood smeared everywhere, muddy footprints across the floor. Outside, the chairman pleaded with Schroeder to set him free, but Schroeder and his wife refused, believing the chairman had brought all this upon himself. Just as Mulder was freeing Scully from the cabinet, a scream rang out from outside. The chairman had been killed, torn apart by the very mud creature he had created. At the moment of his death, the monster crumbled back into a harmless pile of dirt. The neighbors were fed up with the chairman. One after another, they accused him of murdering previous residents and said he had finally been destroyed by his own ignorance and arrogance. In this episode, Mulder realized that although the chairman had created the mud creature with sheer mental power, he couldn't actually control it. So instead, he relied on underhanded tricks to eliminate disobedient residents. The couple who went missing at the beginning of the episode were attacked simply for hanging a windmill toy on their eaves. Ironically, the same windmill the chairman himself had sent them. The streetlight in front of Mike's house is most likely another one of the chairman's deliberate sabotages, just because Mike had questioned his strict community rules. The chairman's authoritarian rule was borderline psychotic, driven by an obsessive need for control and a severe case of OCD. He even mandated that all mailboxes be painted the same color. In the end, what's truly baffling is why people continued living in such a repressive neighborhood. The scene shifts to a cargo ship where two Chinese-speaking crew members were gathered around a large steel crate. One of them explained that it had been shipped from Hong Kong, though he didn't know exactly what was inside, only that it was some kind of ferocious beast. They peered through a crack, and inside, a pair of blood-red eyes glared back. The beast lunged at them, slamming violently into the sides of the crate before going still. Fearing it might have hurt itself, the two crewmen foolishly unlocked the crate. Cut to the ship docked at port. The captain had called the police. Two of his crew were missing. Sitting beside the now blood-stained crate was its owner, a professor who was visibly furious. When they opened the crate, they found the bodies of the two workers, mauled and stuffed inside, but the beast was gone. Mulder was brought in to investigate. According to the shipping manifest, the crate had contained a dog. Scully found it hard to believe a dog was capable of killing two grown men and stuffing them into a crate, then somehow locking it from the outside. It didn't make sense. Mulder and Scully boarded the cargo ship to examine the scene. A local agent confirmed that the animal was no longer aboard. The professor, the crate's owner, was a mysterious zoologist specializing in cryptids, creatures like the Yeti, lake monsters, and Bigfoot. He explained that the missing animal was a rare species of Asian dog believed to have gone extinct 150 years ago. He had discovered it during a remote field expedition. That night around 9 p.m., a customs officer in Bellflower noticed his pet dog barking incessantly at something beyond the fence. He stepped outside but saw nothing. When he returned, he found his pet dog had been killed. As he turned around, he was attacked by a jackal-like creature with glowing red eyes. Mulder and the local agent rushed to the scene. The bite marks matched those found on the two ship workers, confirming the mythical dog was responsible. But something was different this time. The officer's hand had gone missing, and all the doors were locked from the inside. How could a dog enter, kill, and exit without leaving a trace? Mulder took Scully to a local kennel run by a dog expert, the same person who had tipped him off about the case. The dog expert pulled the curtains closed and gave them short statements. Dogs don't attack people unprovoked and aren't as dumb as people think. The mythical dog went extinct a long time ago. The scene shifts to a wildlife enforcement officer who receives a report about a strange creature rummaging through trash. Armed with tools, he begins searching through a dumpster, only to discover a severed hand. Suddenly, a dog darts past him. He chases the animal to a steam room where he spots a shadowy figure approaching. The officer calls out, but the figure ignores him, and right before his eyes, it transforms into a dog with glowing red eyes and mauls him to death. The local agent arrives at the crime scene with Mulder in tow. He's furious since the slain officer was his friend, and now the local agent is dead set on putting down the mythical dog. The dog expert also shows up, believing Mulder needs backup. Mulder is confused. She had previously said dogs wouldn't attack without cause and only go after what they want. So how does she explain 4 deaths? Also present is the professor, the dog's supposed owner. The dog expert clearly doesn't like the professor. After a curt exchange, she leaves. The scene cuts to the professor entering a veterinary clinic where the dogs inside instantly growl at him. He purchases a sedative called etorphine from the vet and quickly leaves. That night, as the vet prepares to lock up, all the animals become agitated. The mythical dog appears behind him. Terrified, the vet bolts out the door, locking it behind him, and immediately calls the local agent. The agent responds and fires several shots at a fleeing dog, but when the smoke clears, all they find is a wounded puppy. Mulder and Scully arrive at the clinic. The injured puppy is lying on the operating table, but the vet, now dead, shows clear bite wounds. It seems the mythical dog attacked him mid-treatment. As Mulder and Scully rush off to find help, something strange happens. The puppy begins to transform. Scully confronts the dog expert, convinced she's withholding critical information about the mythical dog. She even accuses her of having feelings for Mulder. Meanwhile, Mulder searches the vet's office and finds a receipt showing the professor had purchased etorphine, prompting him to call the local agent. But as the agent heads to the clinic to meet Mulder, he doesn't realize the mythical dog is hiding in his back seat. He's attacked, but survives. By the time Mulder arrives, the professor is already at the hospital watching over the local agent. He claims he heard about the incident at the police station and came to check on the agent, but Mulder has already figured everything out. The truth is, the professor is the mythical dog. During his expedition in China, the professor did find traces of the extinct creature, but instead of capturing it, he was overtaken by it. According to legend, the mythical dog has supernatural powers. The local agent had known all along, but in hopes of preserving the rare creature, he kept the truth from both Mulder and Scully. Every night, the professor transforms into the beast. Realizing he was responsible for so many deaths, the professor purchased the sedative in an attempt to suppress the transformation. Mulder pieced this together thanks to blood samples from the clinic containing traces of atorphine. The professor says nothing and silently walks out. In the hallway, he runs into the dog expert, who warns him that she won't protect the mythical dog anymore. Mulder is furious at the dog expert for hiding the truth. She explains she only lied to lure Mulder into helping her capture the creature alive. She never imagined it would cost so many lives. She believes the mythical dog will return to finish the local agent off that night. Mulder decides to trust her one last time and tells Scully to stop tailing the professor and instead guard the local agent's hospital room. Scully is skeptical. She doesn't trust the dog expert and doesn't believe a man can actually transform into an animal. She and Mulder wait in the local agent's room until the early morning hours, but the mythical dog never appears. That's when Mulder realizes he's been played. The dog expert didn't want them watching the professor because she didn't want them killing the beast. During the day, she had provoked the mythical dog at the clinic, knowing it would come for her that night. The dog expert readies a tranquilizer gun and opens the door, waiting. Her plan was to capture the creature alive, but after a long pause, she lowers the gun and instead leaps from the balcony, taking the mythical dog with her. By the time Mulder and Scully arrived, all they found was the professor's body, impaled on a steel rod, dead on the spot. Next to him lay the dog expert, also killed in the fall. Mulder was heartbroken over the loss of his friend. Scully brought him a package the dog expert had sent before her death, a poster of the iconic image, one that used to hang in Mulder's office before it was destroyed in a fire. As he gazed at the poster, something in Mulder shifted, his sense of purpose now clearer than ever. The scene shifts to a violent storm approaching a private prison in Mississippi. To prepare, the warden orders inmates to board up all nearby buildings. During the process, inmate Rawls gets into an argument with his cellmate and shockingly drives a nail straight through the man's hand. As punishment, the warden orders Rawls locked in an outdoor shed, despite the coming storm. Essentially, it's a death sentence. Rawls pleads for mercy, but it's no use. He's left to face the storm alone. The hurricane hits hard, tearing through the town. When it finally passes, prison staff find the shed reduced to splinters, and Rawls is nowhere to be found. A guard rushes to inform the warden, only to discover the warden's body gruesomely torn in half. Cut to Scully performing the autopsy. The body's cross-section appears carbonized, almost like it had been burned from the inside out. Scully can't determine a cause of death and even entertains the possibility of spontaneous human combustion. Mulder is thrilled. It's the first time she's openly acknowledged something paranormal. The room showed no signs of forced entry. In other words, this was a classic locked room murder. The prison guards suspect it was the ghost of Rawls returning for revenge. Maybe he died in the storm and came back to haunt the living. After all, the doors were all locked tight. Mulder inspects the room and finds a section of the wall that's strangely brittle, like it had been eaten away by termites. He and Scully then dig into Rawls' background. At 34, he had a long criminal record. 8 years ago, he was sentenced to 30 years for robbing a telecom office. The $90,000 he stole was never recovered. At his bunk, they find an old photo of him and his girlfriend taken before his arrest. After Rawls was imprisoned, his girlfriend moved on with her life. She found a new boyfriend, and they were even planning to get married. On the news, there's a report about the storm. Rawls is presumed dead. His girlfriend watches the broadcast and is so startled by the news that she knocks over her silverware. But Rawls didn't die. He survived the storm and broke into a mall late at night. He looked physically fine and even had the presence of mind to change clothes at the counter. A security guard found him and cuffed him to a pillar before calling the police. But in the blink of an eye, Rawls escaped and stole the guard's car. The guard was dumbfounded. When Mulder examined the cuffs, he found they'd become brittle, just like the prison wall. After fleeing the mall, Rawls went to a friend's house, the same friend who had once let him and his girlfriend crash there. He asked about his girlfriend, only to be told that after he went to prison, she ended up dating the friend instead. They lived together for 4 years before she suddenly disappeared. Surprisingly, Rawls didn't seem to care that he'd been betrayed. He was only only focused on finding his girlfriend. The friend, fearing retaliation, pulled out a handgun and opened fire. Early the next morning, Mulder and Scully tracked down their friend's home, only to find him dead. His body, like the warden's, was in a charred, carbonized state. There, they also found a photo of Rawls with his girlfriend. Mulder concluded that Rawls was still searching for his girlfriend. Then, on the wall, he discovered some bullet-like residue. These bullets had passed through Rawls's body but had been structurally altered. Mulder proposed a theory. During the storm, Rawls had mutated and gained the ability to pass through solid objects, leaving the materials he passed through weakened and brittle. Scully, however, dismissed Mulder's idea as unscientific. The girl had a sister. Rawls appeared at the sister's house, terrifying her. She grabbed a knife for protection and locked him out the door. But a door was no barrier to Rawls. He simply passed right through it. He pressed her for his girlfriend's whereabouts, but to protect her sister, she refused to say a word. Rawls didn't harm her. Instead, he left a message scrawled on the front door, saying he just wanted his things back. The sister confirmed to Scully that Rawls could indeed walk through walls. This was the moment Scully finally accepted Mulder's theory. Scully learned where Rawls's girlfriend was living and immediately took Mulder there, unaware that Rawls was hiding in the trunk of their car. Scully arrived at the girl's place and discovered that the girl had changed her name and identity. The girl deeply regretted ever dating Rawls. She described him as a dangerously obsessive man. Once, when someone blocked his way, he chased them just to beat them up. He never gave up until he got what he wanted. Mulder asked about the stolen money Rawls had hidden before going to prison, but his girlfriend said she had already squandered it all, claiming she just wanted a fresh start. When the girl's new boyfriend learned she was being hunted by Rawls, he immediately broke up with her, not wanting trouble. To protect the girl, Mulder planned to relocate her. Opening the car trunk, Mulder found the lid brittle and cracking, clear evidence Rawls was nearby. Mulder returned to the girl's home, which Rawls had ransacked in his search. The phrase was still carved deep into the wall, written stroke by stroke with Rawls' finger. Mulder and Scully concluded Rawls' power was linked to electromagnetism. The storm's electrical forces mutated him, granting the ability to phase through walls. To block him, they needed insulating materials like rubber or glass. But one question nagged them. Rawls was so powerful now, and $90,000 could be obtained anywhere. So why go through all this trouble to get back that stolen money? Maybe it wasn't really about the cash. Scully found a medical record from 7 years ago showing Rawls' girlfriend had undergone a cesarean section a few months after Rawls went to prison. It turned out Rawls was really searching for his child all along. The scene shifted. Rawls' girlfriend was relocated to a small motel under police protection, with an officer keeping close watch. On TV, Rawls' wanted poster was being broadcast. Suddenly, Rawls phased through the ceiling behind his girlfriend. By the time Mulder arrived, the girl had vanished. The officer protecting her was torn apart. Rawls kidnapped his girlfriend and forced her into a car. Under his intense questioning, the girl admitted she had given birth to a baby boy months after Rawls went to prison. She had intended to keep it a secret forever, but Rawls had somehow learned of the child years ago. Mulder and Scully scoured all records but couldn't find any custody documents for Rawls' child. The girl had given the baby to her sister to raise. Fearing for the child's safety, the sister took the baby when Rawls showed up. Rawls was deeply moved when he saw his son for the first time, grateful to the sister for protecting him. As for the boy's mother, that was a complicated story. Rawls locked his girlfriend in a storage room. He wanted to have dinner with his son, then take him on a trip. Worried about the boy's safety, the sister distracted Rawls, splashing him with hot soup, but the soup passed right through him. Scared, the child ran out and collided with Mulder and Scully. Mulder fired rubber bullets to stop Rawls. Seeing Rawls chase after them, Scully and the boy ducked into a phone booth. The glass insulated them from Rawls' phasing ability, leaving him helpless. Frustrated, Rawls picked up a rock and smashed at the booth, but when he saw the terror in his son's eyes, Rawls paused, dropped the rock, and turned away. Life didn't give him a chance to turn back. His girlfriend fled from home, driving straight over Rawls with her car. Rawls couldn't phase through the windshield, and at that moment, he shattered into pieces. Rawls was dead. Crying, the girl said she'd been afraid Rawls would hurt the child and had no choice but to kill him. She turned to Mulder and asked what exactly Rawls wanted. Mulder replied maybe he just wanted a chance to start over. The scene shifts to a man named Philip, who is a deeply artistic novelist, lost in thought as he works on his new book. The house is eerily quiet, quiet enough to hear his own heartbeat. Suddenly, he reaches to his chest and finds blood seeping out and pulls out a bloody heart. But instead of panicking, Philip calmly goes downstairs and throws the heart into the incinerator before getting ready to leave. At that moment, Scully enters the elevator, instantly captivating Philip. Every smile, every movement and smell of hers mesmerizes him. He follows her out of the elevator, learning that Scully is there to meet Mulder, and Philip is Mulder's new neighbor. Once inside, Philip presses against the wall to eavesdrop on their conversation. Scully brings a new case file. Recently, several murders have occurred where victims' hearts were removed, but their bodies show no wounds and no clues left behind. Mulder suspects a medium is behind it, since only a psychic could pull off such perfect crimes. That night, Philip can't sleep. He gets up again and starts writing his novel. The scene shifts to a young couple arguing in a car. The girl storms out, slamming the door. The guy gets out to look for her, but a man wearing a hat is watching. Moments later, screams ring out, and the young man's heart is ripped out. The next morning, Mulder receives the call and arrives at the crime scene. The young man is dead, making him the third victim, all missing hearts, no wounds, and no trace of the killer. Even Mulder finds himself at a loss. Scully was on the phone with Mulder when she noticed an envelope slipped under her door. Inside was a pendant carved with a heart motif. Instantly, her mind raced with possibilities. She tried to picture the sender in her head. At the same time, Philip was still working on his novel. In his story, he was describing Scully's exact reaction to receiving the gift, mirroring reality down to every detail. Scully showed the pendant to Mulder and explained it was often worn as a good luck charm. Mulder joked that maybe it was from one of Scully's secret admirers. Scully wanted to investigate, but Mulder had already booked an appointment with her mentor for the afternoon. Frustrated, Scully turned away and went to a church to admire a painting of Jesus holding a heart. Philip appeared and began telling Scully the story behind the painting. Legend said Jesus' heart was filled with a flame of love so intense it could barely be contained. Margaret, filled with a holy flame, begged Jesus to accept her heart. Jesus took Margaret's heart and ignited it with divine love before returning it to her, sealing her wounds. Scully wasn't particularly moved, but then Philip surprised her by correctly guessing her profession and daily routine. Like a detective, he seemed to know all her secrets. He admitted he had sent the pendant and confessed he'd been secretly in love with Scully for a long time. Moving next door to Mulder was part of his plan to see Scully often. Scully, annoyed by Philip's arrogance, went to the FBI to prepare for the afternoon autopsy. Mulder complained that Scully was late, and she showed him the pendant, telling him about what had just happened. Mulder found Philip suspicious, but Scully believed Philip wasn't the killer. After work, Mulder pried open Philip's mailbox and stole his letters. Apparently, Mulder's hobbies included grave digging, dumpster diving, and mailbox breaking. In the elevator, he ran into Philip, who greeted him warmly. It was obvious Philip knew Mulder had taken his mail, but he didn't confront him. Instead, he wrote Mulder into his novel as a despicable character. Tired of Mulder's dullness, Scully began to develop feelings for Philip and eventually fell in love with him. This all came from the ramblings of a struggling novelist. Mulder found nothing useful in Philip's mail. Scully came back to the apartment to find Mulder, but just as she was about to knock on his door, she felt oddly influenced by the novel. She couldn't resist meeting Philip next door. Scully returned the pendant to him and politely declined his confession. Philip's apartment was bare, just a desk, a typewriter, and a bed. He invited Scully in for coffee, but since there were no chairs, Scully sat on his bed. Philip poured out his obsession with her, and Scully gradually warmed to his passion. The atmosphere grew charged with tension. Just as things were about to get out of hand, Mulder burst through the door. He'd found several newspapers in Philip's mail, all listing job ads posted by the victims before their deaths. Philip had written their names and deaths into his novel. Mulder was convinced Philip was the killer, the proof lying in his book. Each murder scene was described in exact detail, and the heart-extracting killer in the novel matched a real Brazilian medium Mulder knew of. Mulder suspected Philip and the medium were working together, yet the medium had died in an accident 2 years ago. Philip passionately defended himself. Maybe his feelings for Scully had angered Mulder. Mulder tried to hit him, but Scully pulled him back. Philip watched their interaction, always believing Mulder was a despicable man and that Scully was fed up with him. The novel ended with Philip and Scully in a passionate embrace. Mulder was deeply bothered by this and fully convinced Philip was the murderer, though he had no evidence Philip had ever been at a crime scene. Scully scoffed at him. Straight-laced Mulder showed a rare look of relief. That night, Philip, still in prison, wrote another novel and asked a guard to deliver it to Scully. This time, the story's main character was a young woman who had lost her love. She was weeping in a graveyard. Suddenly, the psychic killer appeared again, chasing her and ripping out her heart. Just like before, the events in the novel unfolded in real life. The woman's body was found in a truck at the cemetery. Mulder wanted to find evidence linking Philip to the killer. He released Philip from prison but planned to monitor him closely. Before leaving, Philip told Mulder that in his novel, he had written that Scully would fall in love, but he was wrong, because Scully was already in love. Scully was left puzzled, wondering whom she was in love with. Back home, Philip encountered the psychic killer from his story. The killer's appearance shocked him. Even though he had created this character, he felt fear. The killer wanted Philip to explain why he always made him murder people and take the hearts of those with broken hearts. Philip said it was because he wanted to get to know Scully. Scully was a doctor, and Philip believed that creating such bizarre murders would catch her attention. Meanwhile, Mulder and Scully secretly watched Philip, but saw him just sitting there, lost in thought. The killer read Philip's novel, and Philip told him he had misread Scully's feelings, so he didn't know how to write the ending. The killer said there was only one possible ending now. Scully had to die. Philip suddenly started typing again, then picked up the novel and ran out of the room. Mulder chased after him. Philip went to the incinerator, intending to burn all his manuscripts. He told Mulder Scully would die. At the same time, the killer broke into Scully's home, pinned her down, and plunged his hand into her chest. In pain, Scully fired a shot, but the bullet passed through the killer's body and hit the ceiling. Mulder heard the gunshot and rushed home. Philip threw his novel into the fire. When Mulder thought the killer had disappeared, only Scully remained, covered in blood. The shaken pair embraced tightly, while Philip lay alone by the incinerator, already dead, clutching the bloodied heart in his hand. The story ends here. Philip had secretly loved Scully for a long time. To be near her, he moved next door to Mulder's house. Perhaps during this unrequited love, he often saw Scully and Mulder supporting each other, each time stabbing at his heart. He knew Scully would investigate the murders, hoping to get her attention. In the novel, he wrote that Scully would fall in love with him, and it did influence her, stirring feelings. But actually, Scully had always loved Mulder and could never love anyone else. Even she didn't realize this. At the end, though Philip appears to discuss the novel's ending with the killer, Scully sees him zoning out on the surveillance monitor. This proves Philip and the killer are the same person. The discussion was his inner struggle. In this struggle, Philip realized Scully would never love him. So he wrote an ending where the killer murders Scully. But in the end, he couldn't go through with it. He burned the novel, causing the killer to vanish. And with the killer's disappearance, Philip collapsed. The scene shifts to July 2nd, 1947, in New Mexico's Roswell, where a group of young men were playing baseball at a fast pace. Among them, a young player named Exley was a local star, already boasting 60 home runs at a very young age. The glasses-wearing pitcher on the other team wound up and threw the ball. Exley hit a clean home run, ending the game with his 61st career home run. Exley was so outstanding it was almost unbelievable. His teammates hugged and cheered, but their celebration was cut short when a group of masked men on horseback appeared in the distance carrying rifles. Racial discrimination was rampant at the time, and these men seemed intent on causing trouble for Exley. The teammates quickly banded together and drove off the intruders. One masked man was knocked unconscious and lay on the ground. The captain spat disdainfully on him and pulled off his mask. What lay beneath shocked everyone. It was a small, gray-skinned extraterrestrial. The alien looked dazed, clearly not fully awake. Cut to the United States in 1998. Scully was busy running around while the straightforward Mulder sat comfortably reading a newspaper. These were old local papers from New Mexico, dated between 1940 and 1949. Mulder was trying to find historical UFO information. After finishing her tasks, Scully took out some ice cream and started eating it on her own. Mulder, clearly annoyed she didn't share, grabbed for the ice cream too. Suddenly, Mulder spotted a photo in a 1947 newspaper. It showed retired FBI agent Dales. Mulder immediately went to Dales's house with the paper, only to find Dales wasn't home. He'd moved to a small coastal town. The door was opened by Dales's twin brother. Mulder showed him the photo, which featured Dales, the missing star player Exley from 1947, and the alien bounty hunter. Dales had a strange temperament. In his youth, he was a local Roswell cop and, like his brother, had long known about the alien colonization plan. But in those days, no one believed them, so they kept quiet. He told Mulder the story of what happened in 1947. On June 29th, a sunny day, Dales went to the city's baseball field. In a time rife with racial prejudice, he was assigned to protect Exley, the star player, so he could safely participate in a game a few days later. Dales and the league players boarded a bus and quickly bonded. Because of the long trip, most players had fallen asleep. Suddenly, Dales woke with a start and looked over at Exley. What he saw shocked him. The reflection in the bus window wasn't Exley's face, but that of a gray alien. He double-checked to make sure he wasn't mistaken, but kept quiet. A few days later, the game went on as planned. Right at the start, Exley was knocked unconscious by a pitched ball. When he came to, he began speaking strange languages, but then regained focus and continued playing. However, Dales noticed green, corrosive blood on Exley's glove. He handed the glove to the lab for analysis and secretly investigated Exley's background. He was told that the real Exley had been a 6-year-old boy who disappeared 5 years earlier, meaning this Exley was an imposter. Because Exley's skill was so well known, some major league scouts had come to watch, hoping to recruit him. Exley purposely missed some plays to drive them away, but still managed to win the game with a great hit. That night, Dales confronted Exley, who admitted to using a false identity and purposely playing poorly to avoid attracting the scouts. Exley was afraid that joining the major leagues would expose him more. Exley had secrets nobody knew. When he refused to explain, Dales snuck into Exley's room that night and finally saw Exley's true form. He really was a gray alien. Shocked, Dales fainted on the spot. Exley shook him awake, but each time Dales woke, he'd be scared back into unconsciousness. At this point, Exley stopped hiding. He revealed he was an alien visitor whose species could change their appearance at will. Then he transformed into a blonde woman. Exley trusted Dales deeply and shared many secrets with him. It turns out Exley and many of his alien family had disguised themselves as humans and lived in seclusion in Georgia. His family strictly forbade any contact with humans, but after watching a baseball game once, Exley became deeply fascinated by the sport. Determined to chase his dream, he secretly left his family and became a baseball player. Exley thought he could keep living under the radar forever, but he had no idea that hunters from his own race had already tracked him down. The scene shifts to a lab, where a technician calls Dales to report that the green substance found on a glove is a type of life matter he's never seen before. He plans to inform his superiors. Dales urges the technician not to make a big deal out of it. After hanging up, the technician continues analyzing the sample. At that moment, Exley arrives at the lab, destroys all the samples, and kills the technician. But this isn't really that Exley. He's an alien hunter who doesn't want their existence exposed to outsiders. When Dales hears about the murder, he doesn't want to arrest Exley. Instead, he warns him to leave town quickly. Exley tells Dales he's come to terms with things and plans to reunite with his family. Reluctantly, he says goodbye to Dales and asks him to remember his achievements on the baseball field. He's ready to give up his Exley identity and abandon the sport he loves, a painfully difficult decision. Dales is loyal and honorable. Even when pressured by his superiors with threats of dismissal, he refuses to reveal Exley's secret. After escaping, Exley heads to the countryside but can't resist joining a local baseball team. His skin color makes him stand out. Suddenly, a group of masked riders on horseback comes looking for trouble. The white players fend them off. When they unmask one of the riders, they discover he is an alien. The players scatter in fear like frightened chickens, leaving only Exley on the field. Meanwhile, Dales finds a map Exley accidentally left behind, marking the location of his hometown. He immediately sets off by car to find Exley and return the map. The knocked-out alien rider from the baseball field awakens. He's the hunter who's been after Exley. He pulls out a weapon, intent on executing him. The hunter believes Exley's escape has jeopardized their colonization plans, and that his family had long since cast him out of their race. Exley can't understand it. He never wanted to colonize Earth or harm humans. All he wanted was to play baseball. The hunter reveals his true form, as is traditional among their people. But Exley refuses to revert to his alien appearance. He says this human form is his true self now. Tears streaming down, Exley accepts his fate. Dales arrives too late to save him. After the hunter carries out the execution, he rides away. In his final moments, Exley notices his wound is bleeding bright red blood, not the green blood from before. Abandoned by his alien race, Exley finally becomes truly human. Content, he closes his eyes as a distant, haunting song drifts through the air. With Dales's story told, Mulder seems to develop a newfound love for baseball. He calls Scully to join him in enjoying the game, holding her as he teaches her to play. For a moment, all the world's troubles vanish, leaving only the joy of a beautiful life. And so ends this chapter. A note on history. In 1947, the famous Roswell incident occurred in the United States, sparking rumors of extraterrestrial visitors. To this day, the truth behind the event remains uncertain. The scene shifts to John, one of the 3 lone gunmen, having the same recurring dream. A beautiful dream without conspiracy theories, just a fancy house, adorable kids, and a lovely wife. The wife in his dream is Suzanne, the scientist who appeared in Season 5. 10 years ago, Suzanne was secretly abducted by the military after trying to expose a government conspiracy. Waking up from the dream, John arrives in Las Vegas and poses as a worker at a military factory, sitting at a gambling table filled with military researchers. He's there to take part in a crucial military meeting. John teams up with the other two lone gunmen, Frohike and Langley, to cozy up to a high-ranking officer, hoping to glean the main details of the meeting. But John knows nothing about military affairs and ends up bluffing awkwardly. The officer quickly sees through him, and not only does John lose all his money, but the officer also has security escort John and Frohike out. Dejected, John and Frohike return to their room, where Langley complains their acting skills are terrible. They got exposed too quickly. At that moment, two men knock on the door. These two are part of their group, and all five had traveled all the way to Vegas to gather intel on this secret military meeting. But after 5 days, they still hadn't found anything. Feeling frustrated, John and Frohike decide to clear their heads downstairs. That's when John thinks he spots his wife, Suzanne, who was abducted by the government 10 years ago. Without hesitation, he chases after her, but Suzanne disappears into the sea of people. Realizing they need help, the trio decides to trick Scully into coming to Vegas by digitally faking Mulder's voice on the phone. Why only Scully? Because John thinks Mulder's methods draw too much attention. As John steps out of the room, he happens to see the military officer at the gambling table. The officer knocks on a door, and Suzanne, missing for a decade, answers. Seeing his beloved Suzanne so close with military personnel crushes John. He wishes he could just disappear right then and there. John believes Suzanne must be under some kind of mind control, otherwise why would she be with the people who kidnapped her? The military meeting begins, and John can't get inside. He asks his fellow to sneak in through the ventilation ducts and record footage. Suzanne, as a military scientist, also appears at the meeting. Unexpectedly, the fellow spots their friend Timmy there too. Turns out Timmy is actually a government agent. Seeing the fellow, Timmy decides to silence him to protect the meeting's secrecy. He injects the fellow with an unknown substance and then fakes his death in a car accident. Scully arrives in Vegas just in time to witness the aftermath of the car accident. The three friends know something's off about the fellow's death and ask Scully to perform an autopsy. Although he did die from a car crash, Scully finds a strange puncture mark behind his ear. As she tries to investigate further, Timmy suddenly grabs Scully and injects her with the same mysterious drug. Langley returns to find Scully collapsed. When she comes to, Scully has no memory of what just happened and behaves as if she's been drugged, confused, and disoriented. John knocks on Suzanne's door, desperate to understand why she's allied with her kidnappers. Suzanne reveals that the military officer is actually her fiancé. 10 years ago, after she tried to expose the government conspiracy, the military abducted her, but the officer saved her. He promised that if she helped develop a new neural toxin to ease the government's concerns, he would find a way to help her escape. Langley and Frohike ran into Timmy in the lobby downstairs. Timmy, looking innocent as ever, said he was deeply saddened by the death of their friend. He invited Langley to join him for a couple of rounds of board games to honor their late friend. Not sure what kind of tribute that was, Langley accepted the invitation right away, only to be taken hostage the moment he stepped inside. After Langley left, Frohike noticed a disoriented Scully in the lobby. The usually composed and reserved Scully was whispering and laughing with a group of men, behaving wildly out of character. Just as Scully was about to leave with the muscular man, Frohike quickly pulled her away from the scene. One wonders what Mulder would have thought if he'd been there. Inside a room, Suzanne told John she had already helped the military develop a new neural toxin. She and the officer planned to use the upcoming conference as a chance to escape and expose the government's secret projects to the public. Just then, Frohike returned with the deranged Scully. Seeing Scully's state, Suzanne immediately checked behind her ear and found a needle mark. Suzanne explained that Scully had been injected with the neural toxin she'd developed for the military, but so far, only she and the officer had access to it. How Scully got injected was a mystery. It was clear that the officer had deceived Suzanne. He never intended to help her escape. The escape plan was just a ruse to keep Suzanne working on the toxin for the military. The fellow member had also been poisoned with the toxin, which explained how they controlled him to stage the car accident. Suzanne administered an antidote to Scully. Though she struggled to accept the officer's betrayal, there was an even bigger problem. Frohike, who had just returned from Timmy, also had a needle mark behind his ear. It seemed the military had taken control of him too. Now aware that Suzanne planned to flee and that the military had the toxin, they decided to use Frohike as a scapegoat. Timmy handed the controlled Frohike a gun and ordered him to kill Suzanne at the conference. Obediently, Frohike fired 3 shots at Suzanne, seemingly killing her on the spot. Once Scully regained her senses, she wouldn't let anyone near Suzanne's collapsed body. Then John and Frohike disguised themselves as paramedics and carried Suzanne away. But Suzanne wasn't dead. That day, she had checked everyone present and spotted the needle mark behind Frohike's ear, realizing the military's plan to eliminate her. So she hatched a plan with the lone gunman to fake her death and escape the danger zone. Suzanne repeatedly questioned the officer about his betrayal. At that moment, Timmy walked in. He had discovered that the blood at the fake death scene was fake and had figured out Suzanne and the lone gunman's ruse. Timmy shot and killed the officer, then kidnapped Suzanne and took her to the lone gunman's room, planning to capture them all. John bravely stepped in to stop Timmy but was knocked down. On the ground, John injected Timmy with the neural toxin, causing him to pass out and defusing the crisis. In the end, because Timmy was under the toxin's influence, the lone gunman brainwashed him into voluntarily turning himself in at the police station. Timmy confessed to killing the officer and Suzanne. The group fabricated Suzanne's death certificate so she could start a new life under a new identity. Suzanne thanked John again, promising they'd meet again someday. Scully also learned Mulder was nowhere near Las Vegas and realized she'd been deceived. She vowed to kick all three of their smelly butts. The scene shifts to Angela and her husband, Wallace, had just finished a day of hiking. Angela complained that Wallace walked too fast and she was constantly struggling to keep up with him, but the small gripe didn't affect their relationship one bit. Angela said she needed a nice hot shower. Suddenly she started seeing strange hallucinations, as if she were melting into a puddle of slime. After the shower, Angela and Wallace lay together in bed, embracing and saying goodnight. But then the scene turned eerie. The two weren't actually lying in a comfy bed. They were a pile of bleached bones lying out in the wilderness. So what was that earlier scene all about? Cut to Mulder, who had just received the case file on this couple. Angela and Wallace had gone hiking on Brown Mountain 3 days ago and then disappeared. 3 days later, their bodies were found on the mountain, but reduced to bare bones. Natural decomposition was ruled out at the scene. Scully speculated it might be some kind of ritual killing. Perhaps someone had murdered them and used strong acid to dissolve their bodies into white bones, then posed them like that. Mulder dismissed this theory, noting there was no evidence of foul play or human interference at the scene. Mulder explained that Brown Mountain had a history dating back 700 years, famous for the Brown Mountain Lights. Thousands of people had reported strange beams of light radiating from the forest at certain times, and to this day, no solid scientific explanation existed. Scully remained skeptical. Mulder and Scully examined the couple's skeletons. The medical examiner was baffled at how the bodies could have decomposed so completely in just 3 days. Scully noticed some yellowish slime on the bones. Since the skeletons had been found near a swamp, the coroner suggested it might be some kind of organic residue. Mulder went alone back to Brown Mountain to investigate. The yellow slime was everywhere. Then, looking up, he saw Wallace, alive. Wallace spotted Mulder and bolted. Mulder chased after him, watching as Wallace scrambled into a narrow cave entrance. Without hesitation, Mulder squeezed through the tight opening and found Wallace inside. Wallace claimed that he and Angela had been abducted by aliens. Mulder told him they were dead. Their skeletons were found nearby, but Wallace insisted the bodies were fake, planted by the abductors. He said Angela was still being held captive. Meanwhile, Scully was in the lab with the coroner's report. The yellow slime on the bones was a digestive secretion, similar to human stomach acid, but the chitinous enzyme in it came from plants. In other words, it was some kind of plant-based stomach acid. The coroner also showed several other autopsy reports. Over the years, a few other skeletons had been found near Brown Mountain, not far from where Angela and Wallace's remains were discovered. Those victims had been missing for years, so even though they were just bones, no one raised alarm at the time. When Scully couldn't reach Mulder by phone, she drove out to Brown Mountain to find him. She spotted fresh footprints on the ground and accidentally crushed a mushroom. It released a cloud of spores. Scully reached the cave entrance and shone her flashlight inside, but saw nothing unusual. Inside, Wallace pointed out that the exit was right behind Mulder. Yet, a minute ago, there had only been solid rock behind him. Now, a blinding beam of light shone through the opening. Wallace said the aliens must be here and took off running the opposite way. Mulder got up and gave chase. Inside the cave, they found Angela, who said she and Wallace had been abducted. She had a scar with an implant on the back of her head. Mulder insisted they had to leave immediately, but the couple refused, saying the aliens were still inside the cave, and fleeing might give away their position. Then the cave entrance lit up again with that eerie beam. They urged Mulder to go deeper into the cave, but Mulder refused. Alone, he headed toward the glowing entrance. The scene shifted to Scully arriving at Mulder's apartment, where Mulder had somehow already brought Wallace and his wife home. Mulder explained everything to Scully. Not only had he brought the couple back from the cave, but also an alien. Usually skeptical of Mulder, Scully was unexpectedly moved to tears when she saw the alien, saying she could sense it communicating with her. Overwhelmed, Scully kept apologizing to Mulder. Scully's apologies made Mulder uneasy. He decided to wash his face to calm down, but when he turned on the tap, yellow slime flowed out instead of water. Then, in a blink, the slime turned back into clear water. Suddenly, Mulder realized none of this made any sense. His world started to collapse. The things around him began to melt away. It turned out Mulder was still inside the cave, covered in yellow slime, and everything he had just experienced was only a dream while he was unconscious. But Mulder soon fell back asleep. Meanwhile, Scully went down the mountain to seek help from the medical examiner. Together, they returned to the cave's entrance, only to find a fresh trail of footprints leading out, and at the end of the trail lay a skeleton. A terrible feeling filled Scully's heart. Dental records confirmed the skeleton was Mulder's. It seemed he had escaped the cave but was corroded to bones by some substance. Heartbroken, Scully asked the medical examiner if the acid-like slime could have caused the corrosion. The examiner said no slime was found on Mulder's skeleton and declared it a murder, some kind of ritualistic killing. Someone had used strong acid to dissolve Mulder's body to bones, confirming Scully's earlier suspicion. Cut to Scully handing Mulder's death report to Skinner, grief-stricken. Skinner suggested she take a long leave to recover, but Scully instead questioned Mulder's death. She believed it wasn't murder, but a supernatural case. Reflecting on the years she had doubted Mulder, she admitted he was right every time. Scully returned to Mulder's apartment, where friends gathered for his funeral. The lone gunmen, always firm believers in Mulder, vowed to find the killer. They repeatedly insisted Mulder was sacrificed in a religious ritual and dissolved by acid. Finally, Scully couldn't hold back and erupted in anger. Mulder's death was suspicious. Why were they jumping to conclusions? As she spoke, her headache worsened and her vision blurred. She began to doubt everything and suspected a conspiracy hiding the truth. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. Scully opened it, and there stood Mulder. The funeral guests vanished. Mulder said Scully was right. He and the couple were abducted by aliens. The skeletons were fake, but Scully became suspicious. How had they suddenly gone from Brown Mountain back to Washington? Scully realized it was all an illusion, a shared hallucination between her and Mulder, all beginning with their trip up the mountain. Scully recalled crushing a wild mushroom earlier. The mushroom had released spores they must have inhaled, causing their hallucinations. The plants released spores to lure people into the cave, digesting them into bones and expelling the remains above ground. Panicked, Scully urged Mulder to wake up. The dream world began to collapse. The scene changed. Mulder burst out from underground and reached down to pull Scully out with him. As uplifting music swelled, they finally escaped the danger. The two submitted their case report to their superior. Scully concluded the creature lived underground and was enormous. Mulder had already alerted local authorities to handle it. They agreed until Mulder fell into thought. The mushroom's digestive fluid could dissolve a person into bones in 3 days, yet they bore no such damage. The only conclusion, they were still trapped underground. Their escape was just another dream. To prove it to Scully, Mulder pulled out his gun and fired at their boss. Yellow slime oozed from the wound. The dream shattered again and Mulder awoke underground, crawling toward the surface first. On the mountain, Skinner and his men were now wearing masks and searching for Mulder and Scully. They pulled the 2 weak survivors out from underground. During the time Mulder and Scully were trapped, the team had discovered the culprit, carnivorous mushrooms. The pair was loaded into an ambulance. It was their faith in each other that kept them holding on and helped them escape the layers of dreams. The mushrooms tailor hallucinations to a person's subconscious. Mulder, who believes in aliens, and Scully, who trusts only science. Mulder inhaled spores the moment he stepped off the ambulance, and the cave entrance was essentially the mushroom's stomach. The hallucinations even conjured a resurrected Wallace, guiding Mulder deeper into the mushroom's digestive cavity. The mushroom kept generating dreamscapes connected to his subconscious to lull him into a deep sleep and slowly digest him. The beam of light Mulder saw shining constantly at the cave mouth was actually Scully's flashlight. Fearing Mulder would wake from the hallucination, the mushroom constantly tweaked the dream, pushing him into even deeper sleep. When Scully arrived on the mountain looking for Mulder, she crushed a mushroom spore which trapped her in the same dream. She followed Mulder's footprints to the cave entrance, and everything that happened after, leaving the cave, seeking help from the medical examiner, was her dream. In reality, she had already entered the cave and fallen into a coma. Scully once thought Wallace and his wife died in a religious ritual, so in her dream, everyone, from the medical examiner to the Skinner and the lone gunman, kept reinforcing that theory. Deep down, she believed Mulder's death wasn't so simple. Her stubborn denial was just a way to cope. Their subconscious agreement caused their dreams to intersect. She encouraged Mulder to escape the dreamscape, but neither realized the mushroom had layered the hallucination in two parts. Breaking through the cave exit meant breaking the second layer of the dream. They then found themselves back in the first layer. Because Mulder noticed the glitches in the dream in time, they finally woke up. Judging by the corrosion, they had only been underground a few hours, but in the dream, days had passed. The episode ends without explaining the mysterious brown mountain lights. Maybe those lights were just the mushroom's way of attracting prey. The scene shifts to the Ivory Coast in West Africa, where local natives discovered a strange piece of rock with odd inscriptions on the beach. 6 days later, they found 2 more fragments with the same markings. A biologist took the 2 fragments back to his lab. The moment the fragments touched, they suddenly flew from his hands with such force they nearly split a heavy Bible in 2. He removed the fragment from inside the Bible and watched as the 2 pieces fused automatically and started spinning rapidly on the table. With no time to think, the biologist grabbed the fragments and rushed to the airport overnight. Meanwhile, the Bible on the table was open to the first chapter of Genesis. 3 days later, the biologist arrived at American University in Washington, D.C., looking for Professor Sandoz. Both men were biology professors who'd been discussing the fragment research over the phone, but had never met in person. Dr. Barnes, posing as Sandoz, welcomed the biologist into his lab. The moment the fragment came out of the biologist's bag, the lab animals grew agitated and restless. When Barnes asked if he'd already deciphered the symbols on the piece, the biologist realized something was wrong. He'd spotted the imposter. In a flash, Barnes killed him and snatched the fragment. The real Professor Sandoz arrived soon after, only to discover his would-be colleague murdered. Realizing someone was after the mysterious fragments, including the one in his own possession, Sandoz rushed to hide his. The biologist's disappearance caught the FBI's attention. Skinner assigned the case to Mulder and Scully. No body was found at the lab, only blood spatter, so Scully and Mulder concluded the biologist must be dead. Scully noted that both professors had theorized life on Earth began elsewhere, meteorite impacts scattering microbes that kick-started terrestrial evolution. Skinner then produced a rubbing of the fragment's symbols. The instant Mulder saw those characters, a high-pitched ringing assaulted his ears, overwhelming his nerves, though it only lasted minutes. Scully wondered why, if the secret organization was destroyed, Mulder still chased alien leads. He admitted simply that he still wanted to know what happened to his sister, who was abducted by aliens when they were kids. They returned to the crime lab, where investigators found a bloody murder weapon bearing fingerprints. In Barnes's story, those prints must belong to Sandoz. He painted Sandoz as a despicable opportunist, trying to frame him for the biologist's death. But Sandoz had vanished. Scully showed Barnes the rubbing, and again Mulder was struck by that ear-splitting noise. Rubbing his temples, he left the lab. Scully scolded him for joking, but he insisted the symbols genuinely affected him. Scully brought in a guy to translate the rubbing. He identified the script as Ancient Native American, meaning the fragments originated in the Americas. That raised a red flag. How did something from the Americas end up in Africa? Scully concluded the fragments must be forgeries. Mulder, however, was convinced the ringing in his head held the key. And since he'd spoken with Barnes at the crime scene, his FBI instincts told him Barnes was the real killer. They just needed hard evidence from Sandoz's home first. On the wall hung a photo of Sandoz with a native elder. Mulder guessed Sandoz must have enlisted the elder's help decoding the fragments. Back in the kitchen, they discovered the missing biologist's body, dismembered and stuffed into a cramped cabinet. Mulder insisted Sandoz was innocent and had hidden when he feared for his life. In fact, the shards came from an extraterrestrial spacecraft. Barnes murdered the biologist to seize the piece and then planted the body in Sandoz's cabinet to frame him. Tests on the victim's remains revealed radiation only possible from beyond our solar system, radiation Mulder believed came directly from the fragments. The symbol's resonance continued to give Mulder migraines. Around then, he sensed someone else in the house, but Skinner denied any warrant. After Mulder left, Skinner opened the cabinet. He'd installed a hidden camera there. Reluctantly, he handed the recording of Mulder's conversation to Alex. Scully arrived at a hospital in New Mexico and learned that the native elder responsible for decoding the fragments was gravely ill with cancer, his time running out. On the table lay a rubbing he had partially deciphered, and the text turned out to be a passage from the very first chapter of the Bible's book of Genesis. Meanwhile, Mulder was alone at American University, where the biologist had been murdered. The high-pitched ringing in his ears grew worse, warping his awareness until he finally collapsed in the stairwell. In a hazy moment, Mulder saw Alex walk past him. At the hospital, Scully met Professor Sandoz, who had come to visit the ailing elder. The two were old friends, and the elder had been helping Sandoz decode the fragments. But how could the decoded text be from the Bible? Sandoz explained that the first chapter of Genesis actually came from extraterrestrials. He pulled out a fragment found long ago on the Ivory Coast, the very one the elder had been working on before falling ill. At that moment, the fragment began to spin on the table by itself, and Scully quickly caught it before it could move further. Scully immediately called Mulder to share the discovery. A woman answered. Mulder was resting at home. Mulder said the fragments were alien in origin, that extraterrestrials were humanity's ancestors who had seeded life on Earth. Scully dismissed it as sci-fi nonsense and kept contradicting him. This time, Mulder cut the call short, clearly running out of patience. Meanwhile, the woman at his house was Mulder's ex-girlfriend, Diana. She called the smoking man, telling him Mulder had collapsed and that she was staying to find out why. As she began undressing, the scene cut to the smoking man at a meeting with the secret organization's remnants, discussing the impending sixth extinction. Back with Scully, he and Sandoz returned the frail native elder to his home. Family members carried him into a small hut to pray, a ritual that had once saved Mulder's life back in Season 3. Scully then got a call from Skinner. Mulder's condition was worsening, and he'd been admitted to a psychiatric hospital. Diana told Scully Mulder had woken up yesterday and kept asking for her, but Scully wasn't there. Surveillance footage showed Mulder shouting and calling her name. Doctors reported abnormal brain activity but couldn't pinpoint the cause. Scully was puzzled why Mulder had been with Diana the night before. Diana explained Mulder had reached out to her because she was the only one who believed him, believed in the supernatural, aliens, and the fragments, while Scully always denied him. Hearing this, Scully felt deeply defeated. After all, she'd thought she was Mulder's most trusted ally. Scully went to Mulder's office when his phone rang. It was Sandoz calling from New Mexico. The translation of the fragment was complete, a full blueprint of the human genome. But midway through the call, Sandoz was killed by Alex, who had arrived unexpectedly. To save Mulder, Scully traveled to the Ivory Coast, where the fragments were originally found. Guided by local tribespeople, he dug beneath the sand and uncovered a crashed alien spacecraft. And that's where Season 6 of The X-Files ends. The open Bible at the beginning foreshadowed the season's theme. Life's origins come from outer space. Humans were created by aliens. Every step of human evolution, survival, and reproduction has been overseen by these extraterrestrials. Earth is essentially an ant farm selected by alien caretakers, with humans as the ants inside. The first chapter of Genesis, in this light, is alien scripture, making extraterrestrials, in a way, our gods. Before humans appeared, Earth endured 5 mass extinctions. The fragments found on the coast are a revelation from an apocalyptic deity, warning that a 6th extinction is imminent. Only the chosen can survive. Undoubtedly, Mulder seems to be that chosen one, because he is the only person who reacts to the alien script. Whether this time he's trying to stop the 6th extinction or just looking out for himself during it, well, we'll have to wait and see in Season 7.